Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and down here, as you can see, I've got numerous instances of bins getting stacked one on top of the other, and in most cases that just indicates two bins that were launched the same day with roughly the same number of worms, so they're the same age, same type of worm, everything like that. And those are usually brother bins or sister bins, maybe even twin bins if we think that they're populated with the same number of worms. And then I've also got other pairs of worms, such as the ones that we're checking in on today that have been buddied up despite the fact that they're different ages. And in the case of these two bins down here, they were launched almost a month and a half apart from each other. So the one to the left was in early October and the one to the right was in late November. And we decided we're going to buddy these up. So a pair of red wiggler bins. Despite the gap in ages, the discrepancy in feedings, we figured we'd buddy them up and start handling them together. And for a little bit of time, at least, a temporary setup with some of the worms that were used to populate the bin over here, the younger of the two bins, we took a few volunteers to run a breeding system. That's what the little B here is meant to indicate. So whether or not it's really working, I don't know. I've never really gotten the sense that I had a lot of luck with setting up breeding systems, but you got to start somewhere. So I've been experimenting with this, and these are the bins that I want to check in on today. So let's get started. Well, most of the information you see here on this board is about the two bins that we're preparing to feed here, the two worm bins that have the many thousands of worms living in them. But really quick, we're going to jump in here on the last item on the list, which is a small population of 126 worms, or what's thought to be about 126 worms. Like I said, it was just a few worms taken from the younger of the two bins to embark on this mission. And as you can see, the feedings far exceeds anything that's been happening for a similarly aged system of normal. And you know, I guess it's because the stuff I was coming in here every so often to feed was this worm chow, and just a little bit here and there. And I was also super generous with moisture in here. But even during the last check-in, you might have kind of heard it in my voice while we were checking in on the system. I just really haven't been spotting cocoons, you know, or for that matter, worms actively mating, or for that matter, worms that would indicate that they're preparing to drop off a cocoon, or that they've been fertilized and that they're, you know, I don't know if it's pregnant is the right word, but I guess since I've just been not seeing any of those visual indicators that would right away tell me that the mating is happening as hoped, I've just been a little bit kind of, I don't know what to say. I guess I'm sort of operating on a foredrawn conclusion, if you want to put it that way, that breeding as expected in here didn't really turn out. So that's kind of my point of view in here. So I've I don't know. I've kind of gotten to the point where maybe we can try another similar test, but something would have to change, because the assumption is that something here is causing a suboptimal result. No? I mean, if you keep doing the exact same thing over and over and continue expecting for a different outcome, then I think that's one of the things they suggest as a indicator that you need to get your head examined. So the key here would be coming up with something that could be done differently in the hopes that it might result in a slightly different outcome. So I don't know, another thing that we've been doing here a little bit is once in a while just taking a peek down low. Another thing I've been doing regularly, besides dropping some worm chow in here, is also adding to the moisture, which probably isn't even needed so much because this stuff is super damp. And it's the reason I had set up a sump as well. So this is a perforated bin with holes on the bottom with a place for the excess moisture to go. And every time I do put moisture in here, I do pretty much flood the material so that it's getting thoroughly drenched through and through, and then some of the fluid does wind up down in the bottom, but a large amount of it I assume also remains in the environment for the wormies to enjoy. So let's get this thing set back up. You might notice that one thing that was going on over here was that I had it mounded up a lot more. So it was thicker and smaller in size as far as its overall footprint within the bin. So one thing I did during the last check-in was I did attempt to make it more shallow throughout and spread it out a bit better, because I think a shallow environment is one of the keys for a environment where worms have a greater opportunity of running into one another and possibly, you know, proceeding down that road of mating. So I wanted to optimize there. And another thing I did that might not have been really visible or noticeable from above when I started coming in here in the beginning was how I had not covered around the edges. So I deliberately folded in the plastic around the four corners or four edges to allow for some airflow on the sides. And I was able to feel that some of the material around the edges had actually dried a bit, which was sort of what I was after. But then again, you know, I've kind of lost confidence in this system as being a properly configured breeding bin, because I just don't sense that I'm getting much breeding in here. And if I had to guess, my initial guess as to why might be just because of the fact that it's resting directly in front of my drafty window, and most recently it's been very chilly outside. And even though I attempt to keep that window shut tight, I know that a good bit of cool air comes in over there, making for a pretty cool environment if you're near that window. So I wonder if the one simple thing that I could do is possibly provide these guys with more warmth, and then maybe we'd see more breeding. But I don't know. Not too worried about it. Just doing this stuff for fun. So we're going to go get the other bins out here now and get them fed. A fair bit of the stuff that my worms are fed is donated to the cause by family and friends. And in the case of this thing, this was a donation that I had to inquire about because I'm not familiar with what this is, and I've been told this is papaya. And I gotta tell you, this thing's got a significant amount of weight to it. I would assume that the majority of the weight is moisture. And because that stuff has been in my freezer for about a week or so now, well, maybe not quite that long, but it's been thoroughly frozen through and through for numerous days. I assume that as it starts to thaw out and assume the temperature of the surrounding materials, once we give it to the wormies, it's going to become a nice juicy food item, or at least so it appears. I'm not too familiar with what this stuff is. Actually, my idea was to position it in such a way that the skin would be on the bottom, so if moisture did start to get expelled as a result of the thawing, perhaps it would remain in the fruit if the skin were right there. So that was kind of my idea on orienting it. And we got two of them. Perhaps we can orient one way, orient one of them one way, and orient the other one the other way, and then we can see what the difference is the next time we come back in here. And just by giving them something that looks like it's going to draw a good bit of worm activity, it's good incentive to want to come back in here pretty soon. So on the topic of coming back in here pretty soon, I believe that the one bit of info I did not capture here is how many days it's been since the last time we checked in here. It's been 10. It's only been 10 days since the last time we fed these little guys. And you know, there's a little bit of hieroglyphics over here on the edge too, showing how there's a cork over in bin number 1, and then in both systems, still in bin number 1 was a peach fed 37 days ago. And I don't even know if to call them bin 1 and 2 is proper even. the 36-day-old bin. Oh wait, what am I talking about? The 79-day-old bin. The 36-day-old bin is over here. So the older of the two bins has a peach that was fed to it 37 days ago. Means the pit might have been stripped clean, and we can fish it out. And then there's the little clue right there, is the gourds fed 10 days ago during the last check-in, showing us that we were last in here 10. We can see some of the gourd poking out over here. The interesting thing about these gourds, though, is that I had them resting submerged completely in water for about 2 months. You might be asking why. Well, You could probably guess why. The whole idea of that was to take something that was otherwise super stiff and hard, a gourd, and see if soaking it results in it becoming soft and pliable, which never occurred, in case you're curious. I had 3 gourds, so each system received 1 whole gourd, as you can see an example of here in the older system, and then here's a piece of the one that was broken apart and shared. So you can hear hard material. And there's a few holes here. You can see spots where I had drilled holes into the side of the gourd, so that while it was submerged in water, that hopefully some water would get down into it and help soak it from the inside too. So I made a good effort, I think, to try to make it do that, but whatever. Okay, look at this. We got a mango seed. We're going to keep bumping into these interesting things every time we check in on them, because they are all slow composting things. The gourds are going to take forever. The seed out of a mango is going to take forever. Stuff like this over here, though, this cantaloupe rind, I'm a little surprised that it's not gone yet, but got to remind myself that it's only been 10 days since the last check-in. And I think my main reason for wanting to come back in here so soon after the last check-in, another chunk of gourd. This is the one that was shared between the 2 systems, and it's the one from which this long appendage broke off. So the other bin got that other half of the gourd. Alright, I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted here because it seems to me, I don't know why, it just seems to me like the system's a little bit on the dry side. So I think, at least here in the older of the 2 systems, we might add some moisture. Luckily I've got my spray bottle on the ready. Here's some banana peel. A lot of people might already be saying, hey, you know, if you got all these leftovers, you really shouldn't be adding more food. You should give them a chance to work down what's there already before you add more, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm not going to say that that's wrong, you know, because that is usually probably the best way to play it. Otherwise, you could end up in a situation where you've kind of glutted your system by adding more and more and more and more food. And then eventually it's no longer breaking down through the normal processes. It might start rotting because it's not getting consumed by the bin critters and the microorganisms in the system. Aha, guess what we just found? A nice little peach pit, seemingly stripped clean of all the fruity matter that had been on it. So I think the only thing remaining to do with this is to make sure we don't have any hitchhikers nestled into the features of the thing and exclude it. So that's the end of that test. Took a little bit over a month. I think even last time we were still spotting bits and pieces of the fruity matter still stuck to the pit, but now it looks like it's pretty much clean. Alright, we could probably expect to see much more of the same as we get into the younger system, although it's only been a few check-ins since we buddied up these systems, so they're not entirely alike. We're not going to find all the same types of leftovers, but some of the more recently added leftovers were placed into the system since the buddying up. So certain things are going to become repetitive, such as the cantaloupe melon rind, I believe was part of the last feeding from 10 days ago. Something about these banana peels also makes me think that that might be the case, that these were also part of the last feeding. Possibly also just because of the fairly minimal amount of breakdown visible on this banana. I believe if it was more than just the 10 days since the last check-in, it would be a little bit further gone. And I already felt it touching my fingertips, and here it is. This is a crazy looking gourd. It's got a good bit of weight to it, but I'm fairly certain I've allowed any moisture that might have been trapped inside to drain out through the holes I created. So I don't think there's any water standing inside the thing. Such a weird object, and a little bit difficult to see, but worms definitely all over the thing and seemingly enjoying it. So let's see if there's any other stuff we can encounter in the excavation of the feeding zone. And the one thing I didn't really make too much mention of, but is now going to become sort of a obvious thing. On the green information board, you did see correctly that this system is thought to have an occupant count that exceeds 4,000 wormies. So yeah, we got a nice sized population in here, and it's interesting. Maybe that's the thing that we got to watch in terms of how the two bins perform relative to each other. Because like here, for example, in the younger bin, you know, perhaps it's just because of that I've got all this collected cardboard, newspaper, whatever. Might have been bedding that was added unique to this bin only prior to these systems being buddied up, so I can't say for sure that it's a good measure per se. But the fact that we're not finding a whole lot of leftover bedding in this system could be attestable to the really high population of worms, possibly working the stuff down as quickly as we can get it in there for them. So it does seem like bedding, at least here, in the older of the two systems, would be a good idea. Am I getting things confused here? I feel like walking around the containers and verifying that I know what I'm talking about here in terms of how I put these systems up onto the bench. October, November, older, younger. Okay, it's typically the way I arrange buddied up bins where there's a discrepancy in ages in terms of how the younger and the older are oriented to each other, so that from your point of view, going left to right, you're going from the older to the newer. So I think it's time to press on. I've only got so much of my prepared bedding, so in the past few check-ins I've been using a lot of these napkins that I've collected over the past few holiday gatherings that I've been to. So I've got a whole bunch of napkins to feed, or at least include as bedding as part of our feeding. And I figured before I run off to go fetch the napkin, so we could place it in here to accompany the delicious food. We'll also see if we can get these objects, and I got to keep in mind how large this food is that they're getting here today, so I've got to make sure I've left adequate space in here for that thing to fit, and I think we've done so correctly over there. Over here we're gonna try to do the same. So yeah, that was fun. I should have spent a little bit more time on this half of a gourd over here because it was loaded with worms when we first arrived, and then all I did was I dumped it out instead of giving us an opportunity to gawk at it. So I'll be back in 1 second. Get some napkins to include as bedding to accompany this food. You guessed it, if you've been watching a few of my more recent videos, it's more of the yellow napkins. And I've got 3 here, so I figured this system that had all this residual cardboard and paper still here that we were able to reuse, perhaps we don't need quite as much over there. So we'll use one of these 3 napkins in the older bin, but here in the younger bin, not only because we found so little residual bedding when we first came in here and we started plowing through the feeding zone, also, I guess the other rationale, I think, is the high worm count in these systems. So, I don't know. If there's a bigger one, then I think it belongs in here with the higher worm count, and perhaps the way to give these guys a little bit more, since it's thought to have a larger population, is to put those 2 extra chunks in there. And then in here we can, I don't know, do we position it this way and then we get to compare to see how they performed? Perhaps here the fluids will simply dump out, get soaked into that paper below it. Or since we got more paper into which the juices can soak, let's turn that one upside down and turn this one right side up. And I've got a feeling we're going to have a huge worm party going on here. I don't really, feed this stuff, so I can't speak from experience in terms of, oh, last time I fed a papaya, the worms went bananas for it. I really don't even know if I ever have fed papaya. So perhaps the worms will dig it. Perhaps they're going to have to avoid it for a while in the beginning. Sometimes that's the case before a particular food gets to that stage of its breakdown process where the worms can begin taking advantage of it. And moisture, I would guess, is perhaps on the high side, at least over here in this bin. So I think we're good from that point of view. But for some reason it just felt to me like over here, you heard me mention it earlier too, and I think if we start pulling material in from the outsides, we're going to get the same impression that perhaps a little extra moisture going in to accompany this check-in for these guys at least would make a good bit of sense. So why don't we just moisten as we cover up. We don't have to go overboard. I mean, I don't think the difference is that huge. But in systems this age, I think an abundance of moisture is actually beneficial. And I'll tell you the truth, that food that they got, I just got this funny feeling that it's just laden with juice. Like I said, I don't really eat papaya, so I couldn't even tell you what it's like in terms of its juiciness or anything, but from what I could tell looking at the stuff in its frozen state and just its weight, because it's pretty heavy, my guess is that it's loaded with moisture. And as far as things being loaded with moisture, I don't think we've gone too overboard here. We've been pretty generous, but I don't think we're really putting too much of a dent into this. I would almost say that the moisture levels are probably going to be closer to equal now, but I would still think that the other bin is probably more damp overall than whatever it is that we've accomplished by dampening things here. But I always like to make changes a little bit gradually, slowly over time. Okay, what's going on here? I thought I had a spraying wand there for a second that was going to refuse to turn off. So there's our feeding zone indicator, a couple little springtails hanging out on it, helping out with the cause, and back on can come our covers. So I think we're doing really nice in here. These systems are coming along pretty cool, and gradually over time we're probably going to end up with two systems that look almost identical to each other, where really just the age is going to be the key difference. We just lost battery power there briefly, but I think we're probably going to have enough just to get this thing concluded. So let me just really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.